Hello, artists and animators, and welcome to today's interview. What can students learn from a degree in animation? To answer that question, we're hosting a discussion with program coordinators at two of Canada's leading animation colleges. Neil Hunter is a co-coordinator and professor at Algonquin College, and Mario Positano is the program coordinator at Sheridan College. So, Neil, Mario, welcome to the stream.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Pleasure
Thank
to
you
be
for
here.
having us.
The first thing I wanted to ask was, how would you describe your school's animation program and the experience that it offers artists? We'll start with Neil.
Well, I think you'll find as we get into this that there's an awful lot of similarities between Sheridan and Algonquin and the animation industry in general, kind of thing. Um, so I took to answering that question by looking at what is the student experience, because I think the curriculums, we all teach people how to become animators, storyboard artists, whatever. Um, the big difference is we're a 3-year advanced diploma. We do have a degree option through articulation agreements with TUS in Ireland for just doing one more year kind of thing. But I think the thing that I always notice with the first year students when they come in is they find people that are like them. I call it finding their tribe. They may be in high school and they're a really good artist, and maybe there's someone else, but they come in and they find that there's other people like them that watch the same shows, that have read the same comic books. They're kind of, the same kind of people. And I always fascinates me that these people, some of them very rural areas, have never really had, you know, friendships and found people that were like them. And I think that's the big experience going into a college or program like this that I find sort of sticks and always amazes me. It's always cool to see the smiles and people, doing that kind of thing. So I think that's a big part of the experience.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting part of networking is making friendships. People think of networking as being a very like businessy career sort of activity, but it doesn't have to just be like that.
hmm And these people that you go to school with, they're your network, they're the people that you go out into the industry with, that they find out about a job and they go, hey, my buddy from school would used to love this character. Now they're doing this. We've got to get him on here somewhere. And that's part of the networking and everything too, right? So
Um, Mario, from your point of view, how would you describe your school's animation program and the experiences it offers artists?
Yeah, well, first I'm actually going to touch on that. It is important that everyone knows that you are going to school with people that you'll end up in the industry with. At one point or another, you're going to cross paths again. I can't say it enough to our students. Almost a number one rule is be kind, because you're going to be working with each other. When you give a critique in a way that they can build on it. They can grow their skills. It's not just, hey, that's ugly. That's not something you can build on, right? Give them something that they can work with. So be kind, because yeah, it seems like a big industry. It's not. You cross paths a lot. Sheridan, it's been around a long time. It's over 50 years old now. It has become a degree program back in 2004, I believe it was. So we are a 4-year degree, but we're still like a lot of the schools. We're grounded in practical approaches to animation. And yeah, every school does have a little bit of their own take on it, but there's a lot of great schools out there. Um, it's really what you put into the program and how hard you work, regardless where you go. Um, we all have great fundamentals and great bases to build on. But yeah, you're going to have to put that effort in to make yourself that much better, that much more unique. So I think that's that. What does separate us, I guess, is that history and tradition, and we kind of have to balance that tradition with the modernization of whether it's the technology or the software, the approaches. So we do have to balance that, but you're going to see a degree of that in other colleges as well.
So, different people often have different ideas about the goal of education. I think studios would probably see a lot of schools as being sort of like their, hey, we need more compositors. Can you train those up? And it doesn't quite work that way all the time. In your view, what can students take away from a post-secondary animation program? And Mario, we'll start with you.
Sure, sure. It really is that base. And you could start off even thinking about any industry. Your education is your opportunity to experience different areas of that profession, and see what's available and see how things are done, and then start to build on that. Um, so by the end of education, you want a nice strong base and maybe even an idea of a specialty that you're going to go at in that industry. And then on your own, both in self-learning and in your career, your knowledge will always be expanding, right? So I think the most important thing is to really care about that base and to look for that specialty.
Mm-hmm.
And Neil, what are your thoughts on what students get out of a post-secondary animation program?
Well, I think, to graduate, you have demonstrated you have a tool set that you've become proficient at whatever part of animation you're going to be and heading off into. I think the networking is a big thing. We spend a lot of time bringing people in, alumni from studios and all that kind of stuff, and making sure that that's understood. Like, like Mario said, you be kind to people, you're respectful, and that kind of thing. Um, I think too that uh, you have the process, you have the networking, and uh, just to maybe expand a little bit on what Mario was saying too, like I tell students all the time, like animation isn't, Walt Disney pixie dust and suddenly something pops to life and all this kind of stuff. It's a lot of hard work, and no matter what it is you're doing, and it's always problem solving. So if you can solve the problem of an arc or the problem of how the scenes are going to hook up or something, and then you solve the next problem, you solve the next problem, you solve the next problem, you're going to be successful. So trying to teach students to, um, I think, manage their time well and to problem solve means that they can then do whatever it's going to be, whatever software is going to be in the future. If it's going to be like Minority Report and we're just like moving things around, there's your scene kind of stuff. Well, it's the same problems about how does a character act when they're sad or, that kind of stuff. And they'll still be applying those problems. And like Mario said, taking them and making them their own and advancing their careers, they're going to have to rely on new information and new things as they go through their careers. I started drawing on paper and cells were still around and stuff that doesn't exist. Um, and I'm sure that'll be something. I mean, you guys at Toon Boom probably have some idea of what's going to go, but it's going to be different at some point. So teaching them to use a specific tool, I think, I don't think anybody really does that. It's just you teach them how to think, how to problem solve.
If I could just
Yeah,
touch on
you
that a
touched
little
on
bit.
it. Sure.
Yeah, if I may. I love that term problem solve. It almost doesn't seem right, because it's when we hit these bumps in the road that we really expand our learning and really, um, it's when things get difficult that we realize, hey, we're at the edge of my knowledge, and we call it a problem, but yet it's this is your chance now to expand your knowledge. It's a real positive thing. I find when I too still get frustrated. I'll put together a scene and I get hit with something like, oh no, and I have to remind myself, hey, this is where I learn. I'm at the point where I'm going to learn something. I'm going to walk away with something. So it has that negative term, problem solve, but yet it's how you grow your knowledge.
And not to be afraid to fail,
Mistakes.
to try something and it goes, oh, oops.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
there's that,
exactly.
oh, I didn't think it was gonna do that. It's cool, because it goes either way. You got to take those risks and not be afraid. It's just, if you can instill that in someone, then that kind of feels to me like it's real teaching, and doing something good kind of thing.
Totally agree.
I think one of the things that's also interesting about like the term problem solving too is that there isn't necessarily like one solution. There are different ways of approaching a problem, and I think that like what makes animation a skilled craft is that there are different ways of approaching it, and there's so many decisions that go into any one thing.
Mhm. I think if you
Um,
look at how things could go, I mean, every path is you could end up with something over here when you're meant to be over here, but this was maybe better, you know? So I think it's a part of it's part of the creative process too. You know, I think it has to be explored. You you have to hit walls and figure out how to overcome them.
so, Neil, you did touch on like how the animation industry has changed since you first started. From your perspective, just looking at the past 5 years, how has the Canadian animation industry changed?
Um, well, I think we've seen during COVID at least there was a lot of a boom really in animation. Um, there was a moratorium on live action things being filmed. You saw some series doing their last couple episodes of a season being animated, a lot of animated series on Netflix and that kind of thing. And I think now you're seeing a little bit of a lull from that as that's being sort of evened out a little bit with live action again. Um, but I think that's working up. I think a lot of the studios had to figure out how they were going to have people working at home, how they were still going to keep in contact with them, communicate with them, still maintain their production schedules, still maintain their quality, still maintain that kind of critique and feedback that you need in a studio. Um, and I think on the other end of that, we've now got studios where they're more adaptable to you working at home, maybe even coming in once or twice a week and working at home, or maybe even working from a different country and that kind of thing. And it's similar to how it used to be. I used to do a lot of storyboards in LA, but I lived in Ottawa and I just shipped them FedEx. And I think the technology and the production lines have sorted themselves out for a lot of that now too. So it's a little bit different internally, I guess, in how the studios are structured and communicating with all their staff probably.
Mario, from your point of view, how has the Canadian animation industry changed for the past 5 years?
Yeah, very similar to what Neil was saying. We noticed that there was a lot of available job placements and a lot of content required. A lot of streaming services were still trying to collect a lot of content. Um, so it was a high point of the industry. I think it's now plateaued and maybe even dipped a bit, especially with that writer's strike that's going on. But that's what the industry does. It has its ups and downs. It's always done this. It's not the first time. It won't be the last time. Um, so I think the best approach um, to think about this is when it's at a high point, then you ride the wave. You get the work where it is. Um, but when it does hit those low points, it's your time to self-reflect or to build on your knowledge and better your skills, maybe even learn a new skill. So then when the wave comes back, you're prepared. You're ready to jump back on it, if not better prepared, and you just keep advancing your career this way. Um, yeah, and I think yeah, with the pandemic, even with just to touch a little bit on that, it draws into focus the addition of soft skills have to be revisited. How those are being used. Um, it's not just a matter of just simply networking in person, but it's how do you network online? How do you converse online? So it's changed in that regard as well.
Do you think that it's sometimes easier for someone who's been through multiple boom bust cycles if you have like an animation career that's been longer than someone who's only known the hyper demand of the past few years?
Probably, but I think there's when I was in the industry as my only job before I was teaching, I used to see people that would have a difficulty not knowing what they were doing, in December and January. You didn't know what show you might be working on or even what studio you
Hmm.
were going to be at, and that kind of stuff. I think that's a lot more stable now than back then. We're talking way back when, like, chiseling on rocks and stuff. But the industry in Canada matured, so we have shows for teenagers and adults and all that kind of stuff, which we didn't really have, back in the early 80s when I started and stuff. So there's a lot more, there's a bigger audience. That means there's a lot more work, a lot more stability in the industry. But it is scary if, you've got mortgage payments to make and all that kind of stuff, and um, you don't know how long it's going to be and that kind of thing. So I think there is, I think people who have been through it before, they've kind of know that, oh, well, I'm just gonna, it's probably only going to be 2 months and it's summertime, so maybe I'm going to take a little bit more time with my family or something. And other people who are maybe have a younger family and need income, who might have to go and get a different job outside of the industry to cover that kind of thing. But that wasn't that unusual back in the 80s to do stuff like that. Um, but I think from what I see, for the most part, it's generally more stable and will probably continue to be after this sort of reset, kind of thing. But yeah, I think if you haven't been through it before, just hold on, it'll pass.
From your perspective, how have your experience during the pandemic changed the way that you think about remote learning and in-person learning in creative fields?
I can jump on that one. Um, yeah, it's it was interesting going into remote learning. We were kind of thrown into it under fire. Really, we had very short amount of time to do it. Um, Me personally, I like most profs. I like to try and keep my students engaged. I want to help them learn. I want to give them the information and hope that they can hang on to it and recall it. Completely changing the approach and having to jump online was a bit tricky. I went a little overboard. I have multiple cameras I could jump to. I have cut scenes that I jump to, some ridiculous things I've done, just to try and keep students engaged. Um, but going back to the classroom, was a nice. Um, it was refreshing to see that when we were in person, we were getting it right. For me, I'm much more comfortable in person, even with all the efforts and all the different worlds that I built. I found it really refreshing and nice to be back in the classroom helping. Now, there are elements that we can use online. It's now become another tool that we can use. And how we use that can be very strategic and very, it's a handy tool, absolutely. But I think it was nice to shine a light on what we were doing right before.
You said you had a lot of cameras set up. Did you have one overhead for like while you're drawing?
Uh, I teach. Yeah, actually, I could jump to it. I also have I have one of these shots, where you know wide shots, so I can actually demonstrate. I can walk around my stage and show stuff. Yeah, some stuff like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's cool. I didn't have the technology. I just told more bad jokes to try and engage the students, I think.
It works.
uh, we had a week, like I think everybody else, to kind of take the curriculum and put it online. And I, I think to our advantage, we had been exploring doing that inside the animation program at Algonquin previously. So we had some idea of what were the strengths and that kind of stuff, but we'd never done it before. Um, and we were still drawing on paper at the time, so we just switched to everything was going to be in harmony from the drawing point of view and that kind of stuff, which I think made online possible for us. Um, and we really just kind of said, okay, well, this is our experience doing this. This is what we need to do. Life drawing was difficult. You get the flatness of the model, but we had multiple cameras set up, kind of thing, and hoped that that would work. Um, and the first ending the first year was difficult just because everyone's head was in other places. It was is the world ending kind of thing. There was all a lot of distractions then. Um, but last we did a year, another full year online after that, and then now we've gone hybrid. And so hybrid for us is there's a few courses that we realize that teaching, especially software, and being able to record the sessions, made it easier for students. It gave them something to go back to, like Mario was saying, if you're strategic about these things, you know. So we could have that. So if I have an animation class 2 days a week, one day is online, one day is in person. So I try to do all the technical type stuff. So that's being recorded. And then the in-person day is still more bad jokes, but it's drawing over their shoulders and sitting there and showing them things and working with them in that state. So we get a bit of I like to think of it as the best of both worlds in that way.
Mario, did you have a similar experience where like certain things would be easier to teach online and certain things were just easier to teach in person?
Yeah, it demonstrating, like jumping in the software, they see it a lot clearer. It's right there on their screen. It's right in front of them. They could, and if they're not seeing it, they can get closer to the monitor. It's right there. Whereas if it's on a projector, sometimes they want to sit at the back and they don't see it. Even with a big screen, our screens are quite large, and still, I know they don't see certain things. So I have to zoom in. Sometimes I could see them trying to squint or trying to see, and I'll zoom in. Being aware of this. Whereas remote, it's just not not something I think about. Now the flip side is what I like about in person is when I'll give them a little task at a time. I'll demonstrate it a couple times and I'll let them try it, and I'll walk around. And a lot of times, I can catch them heading down a wrong path or running into a problem before they even realize it. And sometimes they don't realize it at all that they've gone down the wrong path or they've made a mistake, right? Online, I wouldn't be able to catch that. So when it comes to problem solving, it's absolutely possible remote, and critiquing works amazing remote. But those over-the-shoulder moments in person, to me, are quite important, and they work well for me.
Mhm. So I noticed maybe you have found the same thing. The number of emails I had to answer, it just stacked up so
It's,
high.
they start to come in floods. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But the administration told us that they thought they were going to shut the program down, that we wouldn't be able to teach remotely because how do you teach drawing remotely and that kind of thing? And we've heard the story several times told back to us, and it was an obstacle for sure. I think life drawing suffered. That was the one thing that really truly suffered because if you have we tried to get students to put the screen up on their TV and draw to their TV, otherwise they're squinting at a small laptop or something, and it wasn't ideal. But I think there were a couple of things that came out of it that were pretty good that I think we're still using.
I think
I think one of the interesting things too about that was like it was partly the way that a lot of the industry was heading towards doing things remote, but everyone was sort of thrown in the deep end all at the same time. Did you find that to be like stressful? Was that like just a process of like figuring out how to teach this? Was that challenging?
On top of wondering if I was going to be able to buy toilet paper ever again, yeah. I mean, it was like, how is this going to work? Like, I didn't know how to, um, you know, keeping the interest of the students. I mean, I was teaching in third years; they're pretty fired up, and the end of the year is in sight. It was March, and they're done at the end of April. But I think it was still hard with all the distractions. The second year when we did the entire year remote, that was a little bit different, and that went as smoothly as could be expected. Um, but again, I really like seeing people in person too, so I like that part. I think partly being remote does give students maybe if they end up in a studio where they are working remotely and that kind of thing, they've got some maybe experience with that, or they can decide they don't ever want to work remotely again because they've had this experience and they hated it. Some students absolutely hated it, and some students thrived on it. And that's interesting too. I mean, you couldn't please everybody, kind of thing. Um, but I think now that people have some experience, they can decide, you know, do they want to take a job with a studio, maybe in Vancouver, but work from wherever home is that's not Vancouver, kind of thing, or do they need to be in the same city and going in every day because that's how they operate? So maybe that's not a bad thing to learn either.
Another thing I wanted to ask, how do developments in the animation industry influence the course material at your school, like that your school provides? And what sort of like communication do you have with studios, if any?
We actually have, just like Neil was mentioning earlier, we have a lot of alumni that come back and talk about their experiences, or are currently at studios, and talk about how they approach things. We do quite a number of workshops or lectures where they share their experiences and their approaches. So we keep our lines open, similar to what Neil was saying, just with the students that or the graduates that we have, the alumni that we have. So we're very privileged to have that, and that they always want to give back. We're lucky that way. Um, and with regards to software, software is always developing, and innovating, and it's great that it does. Sometimes it'll even take a mundane task and make it a lot easier for us, and that's great. Um, as long as we always keep true to the art form, and even when it does do that thing automatically for us, great. But be analytical about it. Be critical about it. Say, hey, is that really what I wanted? Is that you know is that something that I can improve on? Right? How can I make this unique? So yeah, the software does is always getting better and making things easier for us, and we're grateful for that. But always keep that critical eye, look at it, and say, hey, is that what I want? Hey, how can I make that unique? How can I improve that? Always try to make it that much better. It's an important part of what we do.
And Neil, from your point of view, how do developments in the animation industry influence the course material that Algonquin provides?
Um, I well, we have like the same as Mario. We have an advisory board, so we meet with the studio people and representatives from other things who kind of tell us what is new in industry trends and that kind of stuff. Um, we like getting feedback, like we don't like getting feedback like this, but we were told one time, well, the posing's kind of weak. The posing needs to be stronger. So one thing we did, we started a gesture drawing class where we just do gestures, but it's really a posing class. We're talking about pushing the pose and a lot about acting and that kind of thing. So that's something tangible that we've taken from that and changed the curriculum from. But we don't jump on everything. And I think it's really important. I think both of us are schools that benefit from having a closed relation, like it's a full circle with the studios. The studios just aren't taking people out and we never see them again. They are coming back. They're sharing their experiences. They're coming back as part-time teachers. They're coming back as full-time teachers. Um, the studios let us in and work with them or see what's going on and make us feel like we're still part of the industry so that our skills are still kept up and that kind of thing. And that's a whole full circle kind of thing. And I think the schools that don't have that really need that. I think that's an important part for the students to have that kind of relationship with their alumni and with a physical studio as well. Um, so I think, I always think of the studios that give us time off to part-time teachers to come teach with us. That's a huge thing. They're readjusting their schedules or their quotas and letting people come and I couldn't teach part-time as an animator or whatever. I was always behind schedule. I was always, I just never had that skill. So I have great respect for the people that do it. And I think they bring a lot of information in, um, even little things like, oh, studios do things different ways. And one studio does something this way, and one studio does this way. And you go, oh, hey, that's cool. I'm going to use this, and I'm going to use this part from over here because that's makes sense to me. And it just, gives the students more, of everything, really.
So, for many artists, thesis films are the culmination of their animation program. Do you have advice for animation students who will be working on their thesis films this year?
Yeah, thesis films. That's a big topic. Um, they're great. students have a voice, and it's awesome to see them have an opportunity to express their voice and express their visions. Um, it's a big moment, but they're also still learning. So there's that balance, right? Where they can really shine, but they're gonna have some hit those hard parts where they're learning. And they have to remember that. They often forget that. Like our 4th years, hey, I've been here 4 years. They hold themselves at such a high level, and it's good that they do and that they push themselves to a high level. But they are still learning. We're all still learning, all of us. So they want to express this voice. They want to express this vision, but they have to give themselves some room to learn and to make mistakes. And some of those mistakes would be something like thinking of certain scenes that are so precious to them. They put all this effort into it. It looks so beautiful, and the performance is so good. They really got it right, yet it doesn't serve the story. They can't cut it, but they have to cut it. If they really care about their film, cut the scene, get it out of there, right? So see, part of the learning is to know that, hey, that's not serving my story anymore. Get rid of it. So yeah, always keep that in mind if you're doing a film, your first film. Don't be afraid to cut those scenes. Don't forget that you are learning. Um, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Our approach is a little different because we we have students who do films, but they don't have to. So we have an independent study course in third year, so they can spend the year rigging or they can spend the year doing learning storyboards or whatever. But we have students who passionately want to make a film, and uh, the I try to tell them, you don't have to finish. I mean, there's people in the industry that know what like an unfinished scene looks like, and they're gonna just do the best you can, but don't. I don't know about you, but a lot of them come with these epics, like they're going to do these 10-minute short films and stuff that they've been thinking of since they were 8 years old. And there's no way they're going to ever get done. There's 50 characters in them and all this kind of stuff, right? And, usually I find it's like we make them pitch in threes if they're doing films. It's usually the third story. The first one's the epic. The second one's like this other story that they like. And the third one they had to come up with new, usually. And that's the one that usually has something in it that seems to be about the right length and has some nice acting moments and that kind of thing that they can do. Um, but I love the camaraderie. If a student's doing a film and we have a student who's been doing effects and then they get they get sucked into doing the effects for the film and someone else is doing the layouts and someone else is painting backgrounds. And I love seeing that kind of teamwork and camaraderie and the people excited about it. So yeah, they're fun.
Neil, I wanted to ask you, what does an average day look like for you as an instructor?
Well, I spend most of it hiding from administration. No. Um, I have two types of classes really. So I've got classes where I go into the college and classes where I'm teaching online from home. Um, so generally, I like to be at the college. My classes are usually in the morning at 8 or 9 o'clock. I like to get there at least 45 minutes ahead of time and just kind of get into my headspace and kind of catch up with, I wanted to say this to so and so, and I saw someone's email and I just kind of gave him like I want to see you on Monday morning kind of thing, and just go back and check over those things so I'm going in prepared. Um, and then class just usually flies by. Like it's intense, it's busy. You've got dealing with people and their energy, which is always great, and it just seems like it flies by. Then I might have to do some administration stuff, and then I might come home and then answer, some emails and that kind of thing, and that pretty much rounds off most days. The other days I get to sleep in a little bit longer. I get to wear my pajamas if I want, a little bit longer. And but it's the same kind of thing. I'm in this room here. I've gone through my notes. I'm trying to get prepared and make sure if I'm lecturing, I've usually got everything the night before and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of hidden things in teaching that take a lot of time. Um, but I always find the communication with the students, because I'm coordinating a lot of the admin work is for different parts of the program, and I'm not the only coordinator, so that's shared. But it's still a big part of my work day is dealing with those kinds of things as they come up. Students maybe having trouble in a class, want to drop a class or that kind of thing. That all needs to emails that need to be answered and responded to. So, but it's I don't always feel like I get uh, everything into my day as far as teaching my students. So the next day I'm making sure like I'm making up for emails and drawing over things and making notes for individuals and that kind of stuff. So I think the college policy is we have like 24 hours to answer an email. I like to tell the students, okay, we've just had class. I got other stuff to do. If you email me tonight, I'll answer you tomorrow. And I try and pick times where they know they can gonna get a response from me, and do that kind of thing. Try and manage my time a little bit like that. But yeah, they're busy days.
And Mario, what does an average day look like for you as an instructor?
As an instructor, if I keep the coordinator stuff aside, because that's a whole boatload. Yeah, being an instructor is great. I never thought I'd ever teach. This never crossed my mind. Now I've been teaching, well, I'm up to 15 years or something like that. I love it. It's the greatest thing. And I'm learning as well with them. You know, as always pushing my skills, they get to see me push my skills. But yeah, I come in similar, like an hour early. Make sure I have all my content ready. Maybe give it a run through. Just make sure everything's working. Get to chat with some of the early bird students, which is always fun. That's like a highlight of the day there. Class starts like Neil says, it flies by. It's all energy. It's all exciting. And yeah, there's times where you're troubleshooting and problem solving. That's what we do all the time. But it's fun. It's nice to see. It's nice to see how different people interpret the learning. Um, so yeah, class is exciting for me, and I'm sure it is for most professors. And sometimes I'll get a gap before my next class, and if my gap is a couple hours, it depends on the time of year it is. I love compositing. I love doing effects. So usually in a gap like that, either I'll schedule an appointment. So in third year they do group films, and in our fourth year they do thesis films. Um, so sometimes people want help with one of their effects or one of their composites. So, I'll run up and either do a workshop for them so that they learn how to do it themselves, and I'll do it for the whole group if it's a third year, or I'll help them troubleshoot it. It's really exciting. And if I don't have something scheduled, I'll just go around and walk around the studios, and you get pulled in. You're like, hey, what do you think about the lighting? Oh, it's great, but you help them make it better, and they're like, oh, that's so cool, and they put it back the way it was, and they're like, no, I like this better. Hey, that's fine. You know, it's good that they have a vision, and it's good that they stick to it, or they take your advice. You know, but it's nice to be involved. It's nice to have that interaction. I really missed that over the pandemic. That was really a void. And even last year, returning, it was busier than expected. So I didn't get to do as much of that as I normally would. So I'm looking forward to getting back into that and just walking around the studios and seeing what they're doing. And then I jump back to my class and it's high energy again.
Mario, I wanted to ask you, what was your origin story? What brought you into animation?
Oh, that's a long one. um, I used to build big systems, infrastructures, servers, stuff like that. And our program was going back in 2003, was going digital. They were starting their digital journey, really. And they wanted me to kind of, coach that along and be part of that. And I said, well, I'm great building systems, but I got to see how studios work. I got to see how students work. I can't imagine it being similar, but I imagine there would be similarities. So, I told them I probably won't be able to make any significant improvements for the first year until I completely understand what's going on. What are they doing on paper? Where are the deficiencies? Where can I help them? So I ended up building their infrastructure after that. But I started building it even partway through that year, experimenting. But as I was building and learning what they were doing and how they were working, I was starting to see that, some films would look better on the big screen than other films. They weren't better films, they just looked technically better. And that just piqued my curiosity. So I dug into the sources and, started learning how they were approaching, how their pipelines were sorted out, and started developing a standard workflow that we still use today, on how they jump from program to program, or how they approach um, filmmaking. So that became what I currently teach is digital tools. And it's basically to kind of, we now teach that in first year because it's information that they can use throughout their whole 4 years in the program and take it with them. So that was kind of where I started, but it always spawns off, because you're constantly learning. So I went from editing to compositing. Then because you always want to make that scene better, right? So then you suddenly get into compositing. Then you find out that, hey, I could build a rig to do that type of animation. So you start getting into rigging, and then you start to get into animating, and it's just been a constant journey of learning. And I find that's the exciting thing, to constantly be learning and constantly trying things. And then as you learn, you share it back, give it back, and you'll get more in return. And we'll see this with our alumni. We see this with our professors, and I'm sure it's not just a Sheridan thing. It's the industry. It's a very welcoming industry where we love to share our knowledge and we love to see each other succeed.
I think that piece of it too, of like looking at how does this pipeline work and what sort of result does it give, not just in terms of like the workflow, but like the end result, I think is really fascinating. Like how do you problem solve this so that there aren't like weird aliasing or shimmering? It's really fascinating to me. Neil, for yourself, like what was your origin story? What brought you into animation?
Um, I liked uh, Heavy Metal magazine was a French sort of Metal Hurlant was a heavy metal was a English version of it, and there were comic book artists in there that I really liked, like Mobius and that kind of thing. And I started trying to before internet and all that kind of stuff, realized that they all had some kind of animation training and that kind of thing. So I took my portfolio down to Sheridan in like June and ended up running into Tom Halley in the hallway, and he looked at it as he was walking down the hallway with me, and I got into the program. And I thought I would do the course. It was 3 years then and stuff. I thought I'd do the course and then I would start making comic books because that's kind of what I thought I would do. And I really started liking telling stories. And I realized that was what I was always drawn to and the things that I had liked. Um, when I graduated, there wasn't very much work. So I started my own company, and a friend of mine and I started doing little PSAs for people and storyboards for commercials for some advertising places and city TV and that kind of thing, which was fascinating because we had no idea what we were doing, and if we were smart and older, we probably wouldn't have done it. But it was just we were young enough and dumb enough to give it a shot, and it worked for a while. We did that for about 2 years, and then I ended up at the animation house doing um, animating on commercials. And I came to Ottawa for 6 months to work on the raccoons, which I'm still in Ottawa, so it's a long
Got
time
you.
ago. And I just worked my way up. I fell in love with doing storyboards. I did all kinds of storyboards. I really enjoyed doing that. I did some directing. I like Mario. I started liking things, and I wanted to figure out how to do this. We did some digital ink and paint. I think we were told at the time by Silicon Graphics we were the first studio that was doing that. But I think others were hot on our heels. But with the layout artist, draw the layouts in ink pens because the pencil wouldn't scan well, and they hated me for that. But and I like designing stuff. And eventually, I kind of felt like there was a little lull, and I kind of felt like I needed a challenge. And I was actually going to finally I had a couple offers in California I'd always turned down, and I thought, oh, I'm going to do it. I didn't like the place, but I'm just going to go there. That's the next thing I have to do. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, they're looking for an animation professor at Algonquin," and I went there instead. And that was like 20 years ago. And same as Mario, it's like the teaching is just fun. The energy from the students is it's just invigorating. It's catchy. You know, it's they're eager to learn, and I get to go and talk to people about stuff that I like, and they actually want to hear me talk about it sometimes. You know, and it's kind of cool. Like it's not like work. It's like, you know, there are parts that are work and stuff, but for the most part, it's just you're going there and you're sharing things with people and you're trying to figure things out and the same like I was drawing on paper, so I've learned rigging and compositing and all that kind of stuff, either through studios or bits and pieces on my own and stuff. And I love that kind of thing. So that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, as you've worked in like different mediums in animation too, how do you feel about those changes? Like, did they change the way, like when you start working with rigged characters, that changed the way that you work with pencil drawn characters? Like, do you take insights from one to another and apply them and try to like use that to push understanding of it? Like, how does that influence how you work?
I think when I was learning animation in school, we've shot on film, so we would have to go and see John Groot and give him his dollar, and we'd get a little reel back that we could play once or twice before it got chewed up. And in that, you'd have to quickly go, oh, that's moving too fast, or that's, no, my volumes are off there, and that kind of stuff. And that was, I think that made you more precise as an animator on the paper. But I loved having the feedback of a QAR or something like Harmony and stuff where we can have that right away and you can just tweak it and go and tweak it and go. I love kind of sculpting it into something else, you know, and having that kind of feedback right away. For me, that's huge. So maybe I learned how to be a better draftsman in the beginning, but I really like the poking around and what happens if I take a frame off, or what happens if I add three and that kind of stuff. I really like exploring and fiddling that way too, and just you get a feeling from it, you know. So
Mario, are there aspects of the animation industry or the craft of animation that you feel have been underexplored by animation schools in the past?
It's Yeah, that's a tricky one. There's so much involved in making an animated film. It's impossible to cover it all, even in a 4-year program. Um, the education really should be about building that base and understanding those fundamentals and finding that specialty or a couple of specialties. And then at that point, it's self-exploring those finer details. There's definitely going to be things that maybe don't get the time that they need. Like honestly, if we could put more time into just animation performance, that would be amazing. And yet we do cover it a lot, but you can never cover it enough, you know. And I'm sure you could say that with a lot of elements. And then there's elements that don't get touched, but yet you still see a student that it piques their interest and they start going down that avenue, and you start helping them find resources and developing it. You can't be a blanket for everyone. You can help them build a big base and give them a lot of exposure and give them ideas of some of the specialties that are out there, or let them try a lot of the specialties that are out there. Um, but it is up to them to really dig in and really learn that specialty and dig in and expand it.
And Neil, do you feel that there are animation, the aspects of the animation industry or the craft of animation that you feel has been underexplored by animation schools?
um, well, when we were talking about this earlier, I said animation, and that's kind of a little bit true. Um, we had a alumni who's at Disney and went to teach at a school there, and he asked his animation class how many people wanted to be animators, and nobody put their hands up. It turns out they all wanted to, create their own shows and run their own shows and that kind of thing. Um, and I think that's admirable. I think that's really cool, and everybody wants to do that. But I think, you know, animation is still the linchpin of it, and there are different types of people. I mean, there's people that don't like animation, but then they become layout people. They're really good at describing worlds and drawing things. I think there's still within the animation world and industry, there's different people who approach art in different ways. So there's room for everybody, kind of thing. I think you've, like Mario said, you find what you like, and um, you kind of build towards that. So we we have a master class where we bring people in, alumni and people from studios and things, and they might do a demonstration on storyboarding for 4 hours, or rigging a couple of times, or acting classes and stuff like this. So we even had people come in and talk about recording, how to do voice records and things that you may not think about as a student, that, oh, that's part of the process. That's, well, what does editing mean? What does compositing mean? Oh, that's cool. I didn't know you could do that kind of thing. And just exposing them to those kinds of things. And then, like Mario said, giving them room to, if they're interested, to explore them and see if that's where they want their career to go. And then give them some of the basis that they can make a career in that direction. I think that's important. Um, and I don't like trends. I don't like, if a studio says, oh, we need 6 more compositors and we're looking for 5 FX people and that kind of thing. I think it's great if there's people that want to do FX, and great if people want to do compositing, but I think, that's not worth changing the curriculum for and that kind of thing. But I think, a good curriculum, has room to breathe, and for students to learn specifics. But you need a good base before. You don't know what you don't know as a student, right? Like you need to have some basis before you can go, I really don't like this so much, but I really like this more, so I'm kind of leaning towards doing 3D or something, whatever it's going to be. They need to have some exposure to that to figure it out. I think that's part of our job.
All right, I've got 2 more questions for each of you. Where can people go to find more information about your school and the animation program? And where can people go to see more of your work?
Well, we do have our college website. Even if you just search Sheridan Animation, you'll see our program pop up, or the honors bachelor of animation. They do a search, they'll see that. A lot of our student films are on Vimeo, and obviously they're at festivals like the Ottawa Festival and stuff like that, which we're all looking forward to, or Taffy. So yeah, those are your two, or your areas where you can see the films, or see information, as well as you're welcome to share my email address. I'm always happy to hear from people who are interested in the industry, even if they don't end up going to the school, or if they just have questions. Hey, maybe this is something that interests me. I have some questions. Reach out. I'm always happy to hear from people. Like I said, it's a very welcoming industry, and I've learned a lot. It's been over 20 years for me, and I've been very lucky and very privileged to have so much given back to me. I enjoy doing the same. So yeah, always feel free to reach out to the school or reach out to myself. I'm happy to hear from you.
Yeah, and we're algonquincollege.com, under the animation program. Uh, all the information's up there on the website. Contact information for any of the coordinators is up there as well. Um, as far as my work, I don't have a lot of work out there, um, anymore, I guess. I someone told me that, when you start teaching, like every student has a, that's kind of a little bit of your canvas kind of thing, like they've got some part of what they're doing is started with something that maybe you inspired or helped them with, and that kind of stuff. And I think maybe in a few years when I retire, maybe I'll start something else up again, and maybe have a website of, I don't know, paintings or art made out of pennies or something. I don't know, but I mean, there's always going to be something creative, right? But I don't have anything like that. I honestly put my days into my student. So yeah.
Well, Neil, Mario, thank you so much for joining us for today's discussion and talking about your work. And thank you for our audience for joining in. Next Tuesday's art stream on Mary-Eve Lassell and Mookie Tamara will be covering the process of prepping portfolio, so you won't want to miss it. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to tune in next time.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mario.